Okay, so fourth way, a teaching that I didn't explain at all in the first one is by a teacher named Gurdjieff. This reality of being is by one of his students. Another one of his students is Al Spinsky, and the teachings are accumulation of. Fourth way is a system of teachings that is a way, not the way, just the way that really relates to my language. It's a way of observing yourself, knowing yourself, learning how to know yourself. Other ways are the way of the Rafiki, which would be your physical body, overcoming your physical body through enlightenment, like better nails. The way of the yogi, which is like the mind, like the chatter in the mind. If you can overcome that, you can find enlightenment. And the way of the monk, which is more religious and like finding yourself through faith and practices, all of which are just one really strong way. The fourth way would encompass all of them at the same time. Instead of discipline, faith, or meditation, this way calls from an awakening of another intelligence, knowing and understanding. So how do you know and understand yourself would be a great way to start. Yoga does have its own direction. All of them have their own direction. The way that this really speaks to me is that to begin to know yourself, you have to know how to know yourself. And I find that really fascinating. The things that I have brought up with my friends in conversation have looked like that anyways, is that, just even aside from this teaching, there's those of us, and my point of teaching is to speak to those who speak my language and are having a shared experience similar. Those of us who are sensitive, who can see, and on purpose you chose to see through, whether you already are familiar with fourth way or you learned yoga and had the experience of seeing how frequency affects you, seeing your immune system, seeing the truth around you through propaganda, through the truth of your family, religion, etc., etc. You've already had an experience of seeing differently, and there's a version of that feels kind of like shit. I would have probably rather not seen this. This is kind of causing a little bit of angst. And there is a truth to looking at yourself in a certain way for so long that we don't see the way that we truly are. And so if you were to really truly see who you are all at once, and let's just say all the contradictions that you hold within you in one lifetime, you might lose your shit a little bit. Like you have an idea of who you are, and then there is a actual who you are. And that is what I think is cool. And a fourth way is how to see yourself. It describes just various ways of seeing yourself as a machine, the mechanical ways that we have software and hardware, seeing yourself as multiple different eyes, the way that we identify differently, seeing ourselves through what is also called buffers later on will be described. It's kind of like if you imagine a buffer is like that space in between two train cars that doesn't allow it to like clash. So there's something inside of us that doesn't really like let us see the truest version of ourselves, because oftentimes we'll come in with something in order to be like, well, and that's fast. Like that's not something that anybody can necessarily be aware of. So learning how to see that and see how like some of the things that I would teach and that I learned, even that I'd be like, all right, I already knew that. But that even in itself, saying I already know that, is an obstacle, because have you ever applied it? What do you know about it? Like, what does it mean to know that? So to say that you already know that, and then the concept. So to say, how do you see yourself? So, okay, say you already know the concept of self-remembering is a really big part of this, that we don't, like, if you can see that you don't remember yourself, that you just you fall asleep at the wheel basically a lot. So can you see when you fall asleep at the wheel? And so practices that are practical will look like, try to keep your mind focused on one thing for just a period of time. How can you contemplate, not how can you contemplate, but so contemplation and thoughts are a little different. Contemplations is kind of like you're sort of polishing a diamond with a fabric, and then occasionally you keep seeing the diamond within it because you're focused on that one thought. So if you can notice that when you're thinking about something, how quickly your mind is wandered off into the next task of fantasy and imagination, something of different topic than what you started on. So even if you think to yourself that you know something, how quickly can you also identify that you don't know anything about it? You just heard it once before. You don't really do anything with that information. And if you had to really focus on that information, you wouldn't have the ability to do it. So see yourself for what is real. And that becomes really challenging. Like there should be an element of sort of pain to that you don't have the ability to stay focused even on yourself. You don't even remember yourself throughout the day to take a deep breath. And that's like totally different what teaching I'm saying, but like, where are you present in your body where you can be present to what's in front of you? And so can you see how you're not present? I think that there's a version of other teachings that will introduce you to, like, when you're sitting in front of somebody, you could tell when they're not present. Like, this is obvious even with like our cell phones. Like, they're not present. They're in front of you physically, but like they're not there. So to even just notice that in yourself, like how quickly you wander off into literally another world. Like, just even seeing and witnessing yourself do that is like the point of how you observe. There's so many different other ways that I think are cool that they introduce different teachings, or not different teachings, but like different ways to see yourself. One of them that I think is really interesting to describe is, so whether you like the idea or not, there's an element of we are a machine. A machine is kind of defined as you are programmed to do this thing, respond this way, this is your aim, etc. A robot that is like meant to clean the floors is not going to all of a sudden have the epiphany that it can clean the windows. A gun is not going to fax something. A boat's not going to fly. But they're all machinery in a way. And if we are to consider ourselves in that way, it would be how we were sort of programmed from our upbringing, or it doesn't even really matter. Honestly, this system doesn't even really care like what had happened. Just, can you notice it? And do you have the ability to choose differently? Like, a machine doesn't choose. So the more that you're even aware of yourself, the more that you are beginning to have, let's just say, an awakening. You're not asleep, right? Asleep is like this robot's doing this thing mindlessly. And that is what we are doing. So to look at yourself as sort of a machine that doesn't have any authority over itself, and you're programmed to react in certain ways to habitual things that come up, whether it be, even as silly as like a commercial. Like you react before you think. And that is huge for me. And a side note for what I think is curious, of right now we're entering Aquarius, age of the Aquarius. That is also expanded by Pluto just came through, yada blah. It's all about technology, and it's all about this like force of like technology that we don't understand, and it's new and it's coming. And I think that it's easy in our current world to think that that technology means this like AI, robots, and basically like space travel. I have thought this way for quite a bit before that, and that was brought to me. We are technology. We have a technology within us that we'll never understand because we don't even take the time to get to notice it. We're so distracted, which is a huge point factor with the system, that you cannot stay focused. So you're so distracted that you're not even looking at the, perhaps, again, like I'm only speaking to people who speak my language. You care about looking into like, what am I? You know, like I think it's curious that we would spend a lot of time learning about things that just really don't matter, when really truly like the only thing that should matter is how do we work in this world? Like in what ways do we malfunction? In what ways do these malfunctions like affect our life? I think that that's super curious. So we don't even know what kind of technology we have access to. And there's an analogy about the carriage, a carriage being found by villagers, only to find out that it was an airplane. But it went from being a carriage and towed by mules to turning on and being used like a car, to somebody found out it was an airplane, now it can fly. And so I think about this with like, we're our cell phone. We are learning more in like other science information that's out there about the frequency of everything, and how we have, like, we are our own magnetic energetic field. So frequency definitely does affect us as well, and we just don't really have the access to it for one reason or another. And that identification of like, I'm not anything more than this, keeps us from looking for it. And to have the ability to see how I personally connect differently with in different frequencies, environments, music, who I am, how like my acknowledgement of like, one really cool thing I think is the Albert Einstein's idea of like, when you see a light wave, it turns to, or particles, when they're observed, they turn to a wave. Like, I'm probably saying that backwards, but there's an idea that when things are observed, they change. And so you observe yourself to notice that this is like what it is. And then you have the opportunity to say, well, maybe I'm more than this. And so looking at the ways that we could be a technology way greater than what we are. Like, we could have the ability to perhaps clairvoyance and audio and all the things that other people have, like special psychic abilities. Perhaps it's not special, it's just that that's something that they work on in their machine in order to bring access to. Like, perhaps none of us are actually different whatsoever. We all have the same potential. And I think that that's really cool that Gurdjieff does kind of say it could be described as esoteric Christianity, because Jesus said many, many times, like, we're greater than what we think we are. We'll do more than what he did. Having this sort of like wake up, God's inside of you concept, and then like seeing that one of my favorite quotes, or something kind of like a silly story is like, the angels were jealous that God was making humans and didn't want to lose contact with him. So they said, you must hide yourself from them so that they have to look for you and to have this divine relationship. And he says something like, well, where should I hide? Where should I hide? And the angels say, inside of them, because they'll never look. And I do see that this is like, that seems pretty accurate for the most part, that we search outside of ourselves a lot more, and it probably is a little bit, it's a more familiar ground that everybody else is covering. And our inner world can be a lot more scary and mysterious. There's not really anybody to validate your experience. So, and how do you even, where's your roadmap? And so this feels kind of like a little roadmap. How can I see myself differently? How can I sort of see in ways that like this machinery is functioning in this like consistent way, without me knowing. And actually, if I were to study it in this way and tweak it this way, and not let my energy flow out from here and stop identifying like this, or knowing what it's like to gain a harmony inside of myself, that actually makes me feel closer to a source that maybe you can call God, a source that you could just call yourself, presence. That's a big one. Like if you've not experienced presence, there's kind of like, it's sort of like it strikes a chord inside of you, and there's like a melody, if any, that's just my example. So like a presence that says like I can experience my body, and then there's like the second body inside. It's like I notice that I'm having this experience, and that becomes like the sensation of I am. And then witnessing and seeing that, and knowing that you have this sight that you've experienced, the sight of something that you experienced, so that you have a verification that something was verified by you, which I think also is really exciting difference that stands out, that the system doesn't ask faith. It asks for you to look at it and experience it for yourself, so that you have verification, not taking somebody else's word for it, but looking and noticing like, oh, this is what presence feels like. This is what asleep feels like. This is what is meant in the teachings of identifying. Can I sort of catch myself identifying in order to see it correctly, and not have shame? There's not really, what I love about this system too is there's no shame or guilt or you're wrong necessarily attached to this, so much as like the suffering or maybe being ashamed of anything that you find is only to use it as do you want to change it? And like to see it as, is this helping or hurting you in that way? Like, what is your aim? What are you trying to get closer to? And when you see this behavior, do you feel like it's helping or hurting? The other idea of seeing something in this system is so that you do have that level of authority, you have that connection to experience, and so it's something that you can kind of come back to. Like there's a word that something like, remember that you've forgotten, forget that you don't remember. You have this verification inside of you for a reason, so that you can come back to it. So you build up the desire to return to something that what it feels like. Like what it feels like to be awake. What it feels like to be asleep. You can see the ways that it affects you, like the way that it hurts you. Even just the aim that you have, are you even going in that direction? I was just cut off, so I wanted to clarify that and let that finished thought come through. And the reminder that I have for myself as I teach something that is a system that's only really taught by one other teacher so far that I know, or a couple other teachers really, is that this is for a version of me that I needed somebody to speak my language. I am in my own way now. I've been studying this system for maybe 6 years. I love that my teacher Onami will say like limitations create style. I am not going to do very great at editing videos, so I'm going to just try to shoot them and see what comes out that I know about this information, and speak from what feels like the most authentic center I can create. This is for me in the way too that I miss intellectual, intelligent conversations that are like vast and mysterious, and there's no real, like, it's more of a curious, where you're taking on the attitude of life as school, that you could be respectfully curious about a lot of different things. And the sort of selling point here is, can you be respectfully curious about yourself? Do you want to know about yourself? And this is like one way to observe yourself that I find really fascinating, and it makes me feel whole in a way to share it. And this will be my first time actually trying to share something this. I'm just going to put it out there and just teach until it feels right. The other main, if I were to say the aim I have of it, is also to, why not think that my intellectual property and what I've been studying and how I naturally want to teach things shouldn't be valuable. I've paid for them before in the past. I was curious and hungry for different information, and when it was presented to me, I wanted it. So I have a delusional lifestyle anyways. I am becoming a mom. I do work in the hair industry now, and I love doing the head spas, where it's very spiritual and rooted in like aligned groundness for me. I just also see a future in my life where I'm home with my child, and I plan on teaching from home. And I am also living in my fullest expression, where when I'm not teaching and talking about concepts that are making up the foundation of my experience, I feel disconnected. I feel like there's a struggle that I'm choosing, but the choice would be to teach this and let it be a struggle of being seen and wrong and silly, or I could choose that I have to step away from my child and what I believe feels like it wants to come out for years now. So I can live in the truth of one or the other, and I'm going to choose this one for now because fuck it. I needed somebody to speak my language. I need this. I know that this limitless life is available to me, and when I'm small in it, it's only going to teach my child to be small in it. I have bigger plans. And so here goes. If you made it this far, thanks for being here. I'm going to keep trying.